Any time after that is no problem. I cannot do them in reverse, including.
You're doing that with the same couple.
Yes, right. But if I were to do it in reverse, let's say have the Jewish wedding and then not sign the license right away, that would be fraud. And apparently it's because there was some period of time where pastors were going around saying you're married, right? According to the church, you're married. And then people will go and file their taxes thinking that they're married, but the state has never heard of anything of the sort. So every once in a while, there is a situation where like a family wants to get married, let's say before Shabbat ends, but there is enough of a religious part of their family that they want to sign the ketubah beforehand. So it's a bit of a gray area, right? But the ketubah, at the very least, is a betrothal contract, right? It's not. It doesn't make you officially married to somebody until you exchange the vows and the rings. So it's sort of a part A, part B scenario. But it's tricky business, right? They will teach this to Will at school because Will eventually officiate, things as well. They're just talking about it. Yes, they will. Probably on the last day, like they did with us. So like, oh, by the way,
what is this for?
It's just like marrying people and the legalities of it, and not doing one before the other and stuff.
You can marry people too.
So HUC would frown upon even though technically, right, Will could go and get one of these online things to do. They would frown upon.
Then I believe it becomes harder to do it once you actually get ordained. If you do like a fake thing beforehand.
It is a little. You have to like renounce it to some degree. I think actually in New York City I may still be on the books.
Welcome home.
Thank you, and I'm sorry that I responded to your lovely text earlier. I will apologize to everybody at the outset. That's always the way these things go,
I didn't expect it to be
Well, no, but it meant obviously it meant a lot, and it's yeah. He's improving. He's not home yet, so lose with him right now. No. He's actually, I was just saying, he's in a different hospital now for PT because he, in recovering from the flu, he wasn't able to walk immediately normally, and he lost a lot of muscle strength and things like that. So I know, poor guy. But resilient soul, resilient soul for sure. And everybody loves him. Like, everybody loves him. Everywhere we go, loves. Linda, do me a favor. Let's just make sure, and Ellen, maybe you can help us too. Let's make sure people get groggers. Groggers are.
I have a snapper.
The truth is, my dad always had like a big wooden one that I love, but the thing was like, if you weren't careful, you could take out the person in the row behind you. So you have to be really grog away, everyone. Gonna get something to drink. Yeah, that's a good place, Come get your grog.
Where are you sitting? Well, I'm sitting here. So go ahead. You want to sit? Where are you going to sit? I'm sitting on my tuchus. I'm sitting on my tuchus. That's what I said. I'm like right here.
Well, you can
sit there.
And I would go around, I'll take a long walk, and I'll eventually.
Take a long walk off a short pier.
How are you, Will? I'm good. How are you?
Say how you been.
Yeah, happy to.
Are you going to be here tomorrow?
I'm not going to be here tomorrow. I had a previous commitment, unfortunately. I will be here next week, though. Yeah. For next year, I do. Rodef Sholem. It's in the city on the Upper West Side. Yeah.
Saturday, I'm sponsoring the
It is.
on Saturday.
Yeah.
So where is
You know, you guys can,
It's 83rd and Central Park West.
in our group of graduation, graduate class, we're all going back. So now we're all 78 now.
You know, in our town, it's usually they have and then everybody steps over and say hello.
By
We're doing it in the senior center, so it's, you know, people like, how old are you? What's the oldest?
we had it, when did we have the Indian food the last time? Remember we sat in the banquet, we had it downstairs? Yeah, it's spicy. So you gotta be, I mean, I don't care if it's spicy. All is my stuff. But you gotta, yeah, like the rice is good, there are other things that are not spicy, I think it's very well spicy. Just, you know, just taste.
Are they gonna have it like, you just take what you want?
Yeah, it's gonna be on there.
Yeah.
It's gonna be up there, yeah. Yeah, for do. Okay. Oh my.
Somebody said bring Tom's.
I have that bill, but I don't have Tom's. You take one before you come. Oh my gosh. Oh, today, well, Mary.
You have to get a,
We're gonna have how much?
you have to get a printer. Oh, you did? Yeah, well, I have to. Yeah, I need a ankle replacement. That's gonna be a good deal. 2 weeks in a cast with my leg up, not moving. 23 hours a day. Not moving. 2 weeks. And then they take the cast off and then get a scooter. No pressure on the leg. I'll be able to
We had the same,
for a while.
we had the same one, the same one I got.
No, a month total. 2 weeks and then another 2 weeks.
not long ago,
At least there won't be no. I don't know what they're gonna do, but I asked to be in Mary Manning Jean. Surgery, I wouldn't have it done anyway. Legally, it's new. I'll be in. And then I asked to be in Mary Manning Walsh, which is across the way. And it's a new kind, it's a relatively new, she said, she's done it on, she's done it on.
Samson.
Oh,
Hadassah.
I am on, I take time, like 1,350 milligrams of time.
That's what we're
And
gonna
it's
do.
still, I went,
Hadassah.
yeah, I have a break. I went to Amazon and I got
I
a break and
used to go on the Grenade with girls, I was.
last September 23, I had to have a new fall in my head.
But hers are big and
So I had to move on my head. And then an injury that I had 8 years before that, I sprained an ankle.
what?
Plus arthritis,
B'nai
plus
B'rith.
they changed
Well,
the
excuse me.
sport.
B'nai B'rith.
Changed my head.
B'nai B'rith is the words, it's denied breed, as we would say
So
it,
I
so
had
we
to
use
get
like sons of
cortisone
the
shots in it.
children in common,
Oh,
like the organization.
right.
So then,
Order of becoming, so it's like,
And breed is stuff.
oh, thanks, yeah.
it worked on the arthritis, but it didn't work on the fact that
I was too, B'nai with girls.
and that's the thing.
We had parties with B'nai with boys.
It's, and, you know,
We had
Purim Sameach, so good to see you. No, you're not. Never.
No, you are.
It's okay.
Don't worry. I just look at it as an opportunity. I'll explain my costume in a second. But no, but yeah, no, I think, but it's challenging, right? It's like every year where we show up and then nobody else is in costume, it feels tough. But I felt like if I didn't do at least something.
I'm going as myself on a day off.
Ooh,
Yeah, that's my costume.
I like that. It's the perfect thing.
Amazing.
You know. Oh, that's right. That's right. That's right. They take that. That's the great thing about the Bittens. They take that stuff, seriously, which is good.
Yeah. Do we have the Megillah?
Oh yes.
Good. How are you?
Yeah, this one, and this is how you know, by the way, that it's actually a Megillah that somebody actually used. I don't know if you know this, but Megillah is the one where they actually teach you to fold rather than roll.
Okay.
So you'll see, like, there's parts of it that are way sort of crazier.
Creased.
But years ago, I made these little markings to know where
to
things
fold
generally are. No, just like where
Oh, like
our
a chapter
verses are.
begins?
Yeah, or actually specifically our
Our
sets of
readings?
verses and stuff like that.
I
So,
see.
so that's basically it. So I think our idea is like, when
follow.
when you're there and when they're
I'll follow.
back and forth. And I'll do. I realize actually there are all these blessings in the melody that I have in my head. I'm not sure actually matches these, but I don't know. So we're gonna see what it is. Whatever comes out of my mouth.
Worst comes to worst, do Haftarah. Yeah, that's also good. Just Haftarah.
All right, so let me. It's 6 o'clock.
You especially, I know you're the noisiest. I take notes and go.
How was the show on Sunday? Was it? Oh, good. Had a good time.
He gets the iPad, he gets and at this point, because part of it was just getting to eat again. So you know what his breakfast was this morning? Oh, this was yes. Great. Okay, Chag Purim Sameach, everybody.
Purim Sameach.
So I was just explaining as I was walking in. Yeah. Oh, wait a second. We'll give a second. Shelly, you good? Is anybody else out there? We can. No. Okay. Yeah. It's good. All right. Chag Sameach, everyone. Chag Sameach. It's great to see all of your beautiful costumes. Everybody, the camera can't tell. So as far as they're concerned, you dressed up like Wicked. That's where we are. No, I think actually, in some ways, I'm proud of our countercultural nature here at the temple because every other synagogue, I'm pretty sure, is doing wicked. I think
Everyone is
every
doing wicked.
other shul in the world is
Yeah.
doing wicked.
Angela Buchtal is green. Every rabbi
You know
is
what?
green.
Exactly.
Every
yeah.
rabbi is green.
We just prefer ourselves normal call. But I will say, and I couldn't find my yearly banana costume, so I'm still bummed about that. But this is not just any random football jersey. I will explain. Not just any random football jersey. This is probably the one and only version of a Matt Bernstein jersey from about 2002 in the University of Wisconsin. Matt Bernstein is a proud Jewish fullback for the university, and he played the role, for those that don't know football well, fullbacks, generally speaking, not your star player. Normally, their main job is to run in front of the running back and get everybody out of the way. But one game, while I was in school at Wisconsin, happened to be the game that began at the end of Yom Kippur. All three of the starting running backs of the team all were injured. The only person on the team that could possibly be the running back was Matt Bernstein, the fullback, who fasted the entire day, got a quick round of fluids and an IV, and then ran for 3 touchdowns and 150-something odd yards. And so I found somehow or another the one copy of this jersey that I'm pretty sure exists outside. So wherever Matt Bernstein is, Chag Sameach to him. And
I thought you
you
were
know,
going to be the fullback.
look, I basically, I will say this, Neil. Never in my life have I felt like a small person until I was in the tunnel one day when the team was coming out. And I was standing next to these guys, and Matt is basically about my size, except he could run a 4.5 40 or something. But then I was next to one of the offensive linemen, guys are 6, 7, 8, feet tall. It's insane how big they are. But I like to relive some vision of a glory day that never existed for myself. So I guess that's it. Look, as we say, why do we dress up in costumes? Purim is an interesting holiday, as Will and I were talking about. It's one of those, it's not actually kind of a holiday, but then it becomes a holiday, and then over time, it picks up a number of other cultural norms from other places, right? So a lot of our dressing up and all of that is connected to things like the Carnival in Italy and Florence?
I don't know. off the top of my
Venice?
head.
Venice, I think. Venice. I looked at my world travelers to tell me the truth. Right? And, but some of it is this idea of turning things on its head, right? Of turning what seems like, again, at the beginning of the story, where things are going in a really bad direction, right? Things come out on the opposite side at the other end. And we dress up really oftentimes as the opposite of who we are, which is why, unusually, what's one of the very common costumes you'll see traditionally at a Purim celebration? Who do we... Exactly. The last person in the world that you'd think anybody's going to dress up as. And there is a freedom to that. There is some freedom to saying, like, I can imagine being the exact opposite of myself, even for a short period of time, even perhaps for just a little bit of perspective. But, nevertheless... Yeah. So, last couple of words. Just, first of all, thanking everybody. If I haven't responded to any texts, and those that maybe don't know, poor little Emmett got the flu a couple of weeks ago, and it got worse. And so I've been in the hospital with him, and Lou's been in the hospital with him basically for the last couple of weeks. And I'm going to probably leave right afterwards to go back to be with him and then come back tomorrow night. But he's really going in the right direction. And one joyful thing to share is what he had for breakfast this morning, which was half a can of Pringles, Dunkin' Donuts chocolate frosted donut, which has been pretty much his breakfast for the last week every day. And what was 2 Tate's cookies, of which he rejected one because there was a small divot in the backside of one of the cookies.
Understandable.
So, in some ways, he's finding a way to live his best life, even in unfortunate circumstances. So, Emmett, on the off chance that Lou is showing this to you now, you're watching. Love you. All right, Will, great to see you.
Good to see you as
Great
well.
to be back.
Farm
We're not davening mincha, okay? We're just doing Megillah tonight. We're doing a little bit. We're doing some chanting. We're doing some English. We're doing some paraphrasing. A little bit of that. Reminder again, 4 mitzvahs associated with this holiday. Anybody know? Can we rattle them off? Shalach manis, Ed said properly, right? Okay. Right? There you go. We got it.
Not reading the Megillah.
Hearing the Megillah, very important. Even better, yeah. Well, you go home and watch it on YouTube right afterwards. But no, this is actually one of those things I will tell you. One of the great, strange joys of the internet age is that tonight when you're done here, you can actually go online and you can watch, all these different synagogues.
watch
do
everyone do
everyone
Wicked.
do Wicked. And you'll have a wonderful time with it. But I'm happy to be here with all of you, and I'm very happy to be here
Very
with
happy to
Will.
be here with you as well.
And so we thought maybe we would sing a little bit just to get us started. If you want to just listen, you can. If you know it, even better. But Will, I think you have a page number for it if you'd
So
like.
it's in our Siddur on page 556. It's also associated with Hanukkah, but it's also a season of miracles at Purim. So we are going to begin with Al Hanisim. Al Hanisim ve'al ha'porkan ve'al ha'gurot ve'al ha'truot ve'al ha'milchamot she'asita lavoteinu bayamim ha'hem b'zman hazeh. Al hanisim ve'al ha'porkan ve'al ha'gvurot ve'al ha'truot ve'al ha'milchamot she'asita lavoteinu bayamim ha'hem b'zman hazeh. Al hanisim ve'al ha'porkan ve'al ha'gvurot ve'al ha'truot ve'al ha'milchamot she'asita lavoteinu bayamim ha'hem b'zman hazeh.
Ooh, I like that.
And a little bit.
That was good. Okay, now everybody in the room, hopefully you have a copy of what we're reading from the Megillah tonight. If you don't, let us know. Also, hopefully you have a grogger in your hands. Grogger, very important. If you don't have a grogger, we got a whole bucket of groggers right up here. Very good. All right, and we're going to practice a little bit before we get started. Okay, so when oh, poor Mimi. I know. It is an infuriating noise. There's no question. But when do we use the grogger? What are we going to do? Yeah. Right, very good. So Roger, why do we do it? What's the grogger about? Why do we do that? Very nice. So when the evil Haman, hey, very good. Good. All right. When we hear that name, okay, simple and yet profound. Simple and yet profound. Right? That little act of using the grogger, of course, like most great things in Judaism, is actually really designed for kids, right? It's to give them a good time, make them connect to the holiday and all that. But its profound message is this, is that sometimes, right, when you have a terrible evil that exists in the world, you can't necessarily always, make it disappear as you want to, when you want to. But our expectation is to try to create a circumstance where that, whatever that is, right, whatever that thing is that is chasing us, is that image in our mind that keeps us up at night, right, we have an active responsibility to push it back, right, to push it away. Sometimes we do that through physical action, sometimes we do that through, right, the simple act of this noise, right, this noise that just blocks everything else out, so that even though we can't completely wipe this terrible moment or this terrible person away, right, it's a way of us showing that we are resilient in the face of all of it, and that we're not going to simply be quiet in the face of horror or injustice, or in this case, terrible evil. And, I don't think it is much of a stretch to say that the holiday and the story have certain resonances for, our certain realities of the time. I'll leave it to all of you to make some of the connections between here and there, but, let's just simply say there's a line in the Mishkan Tefillah that we read every once in a while that says, that history like this happens all the time, right? And that part of these stories are meant for us to realize we conquered that problem, but we have our own issues to deal with. And while today is a day for joyfulness and frivolity and for all of that, the message is still important. And when we see connections between ancient experiences and modern day ones, we would be foolish not to pay close attention to the lessons that we need to derive. So, with all that serious things aside, like I said, tonight we're going to do a little bit of back and forth. We're going to chant a little Hebrew, read a little bit in English, talk a little bit about it in between. We have an actual Megillah, which our reader will be reading from the page, and then the other will follow, so Will and I will kind of trade places.
Yep.
And we'll start with some blessings. If you want to see those blessings, they're in our prayer book on page 573. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al mikra Megillah. You guys say?
Amen.
Thank you. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'asa nisim lavotenu ve'imotenu bayamim hahem bazman hazeh.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shechianu v'kimanu v'gianu lazman hazeh.
Amen.
All right, so we'll begin from chapter 1, verse 1. You can find it in your daf. Those that are following along, if you don't have something, go to Safari. You should be able to get it right away. And as I said, we'll keep moving back and forth. We'll let you know where we are all throughout. Vayehi bimei Achashverosh, hu Achashverosh, המולך מהודו ועד כוש, 27 ומאה מדינה, בימים ההם כשבט המלך אחשוורוש, על כיסא מלכותו, אשר בשושן הבירה, בשנת 3 למלכו, עשה משתה לכל שריו ועבדיו, חיל פרס ומדי, הפרטמים ושרי המדינות לפניו, בהרותו את עושר כבוד מלכותו, ואת יקר תפארת גדולתו, ימים רבים 800 יום, ובמלאת הימים האלה עשה המלך לכל העם הנמצאים בשושן הבירה, למגדול ועד קטן, משתה 7 ימים בחצר, עינת ביתן המלך, חור כרפס ותכלת, אחוז בכלי וצבי ארגמן, על גלילי כסף עמודי 6, מיטות זהב וכסף, על רצפת בת ושש, ודהר וסוחרת, והשקות בכלי זהב, וכלים מכלים שונים, ואין מלכות רב כיד המלך, והשתייה כדת אין אונס, כי כן ייסד המלך על כל רב ביתו, לעשות כרצון איש ואיש. גם ושתי המלכה עשתה משתה נשים בית המלכות, אשר למלך אחשוורוש.
It happened in the days of Ahasuerus that Ahasuerus, who reigned over 127 provinces from India to Nubia. In those days, when King Ahasuerus occupied the royal throne in the fortress Shushan, in the 3rd year of his reign, he gave a banquet for all the officials and courtiers, the administration of Persia and Media, the nobles and the governors of the provinces in his service. For no fewer than 180 days he displayed the vast riches of his kingdom and the splendid glory of his majesty. At the end of this period, the king gave a banquet for 7 days in the court of the king's palace garden for all the people who lived in the fortress Shushan, high and low alike. There were hangings of white cotton and blue wool, caught up by the cords of fine linen and purple wool, to silver rods and alabaster columns, and there were couches of gold and silver on a pavement of marble, alabaster, mother of pearl, and mosaics. Royal wine was served in abundance as befits a king in golden beakers, beakers of varied design. And the rule for drinking was no restrictions. For the king had given orders to every palace steward to comply with each man's wishes. In addition, Queen Vashti gave a banquet for women in the royal palace of King Ahasuerus.
So, before we get to our next chanted section, just to fill in the gaps a little bit, as we leave here, we are introduced to one of the great heroines of history, quite frankly, of Queen Vashti. Why? Okay, Vashti is written off pretty quickly in the story, but she leaves a very important impact. What does she do right off the bat? Okay, she speaks, as they say, truth to power. She refuses to do what the king asks, and what the king asks, again, this is the part we're skipping over, is utter humiliation. Right? Asks her basically, to dance naked in front of his guests. Okay, the absolute worst thing. And again, Ahasuerus is an interesting character in this story. Various points we see him as something hero adjacent, helpful in certain ways, but also rather aloof to, quite frankly, basic human decency. So we're introduced right off the bat to some pretty complicated scenarios. And of course, Vashti's refusal is not met happily by the king.
It's not.
It is not at all. And so in the rage, he sends her away. And, let's hope that actually is what happens. Because in other circumstances, that usually is the end of the story for Vashti. But in the place of Vashti, there is now a need for a new queen. And this sets the stage for what we are to find in chapter 2 and the introduction of our next heroine. And so we'll skip now to chapter 2, verse 5. And for this, we're going to read in English. I'm going to read this first section, and then we'll count over from there. In the fortress Shushan lived a Jew by the name of Mordechai, son of Yair, son of Shimi, son of Kish, a Benjaminite. Kish had been exiled from Jerusalem in the group that was carried into exile, along with King Jechoniah of Judah, which had been driven into exile by King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon. He was foster father to Hadassah, that is, Esther, his uncle's daughter, and for she had never had father nor mother. The maiden was shapely and beautiful, and when her father and mother died, Mordecai adopted her as his own daughter. When the king's order and edict were proclaimed, and when many girls were assembled in the fortress Shushan under the supervision of Haggai, Esther was taken into the king's palace under the supervision of Haggai, guardian of the women. The girl pleased him and won his favor, and he hastened to furnish her with her cosmetics and her rations, as well as with the 7 maids who were her due from the king's palace. And he treated her and her maids with special kindness in the harem. Esther did not reveal her people or her kindred, for Mordecai had told her not to reveal it. In other words, she didn't give away her identity. They did not know that she was a Jew. Every single day, Mordecai would walk about in front of the court of the harem to learn how Esther was faring and what was happening to her. Now, before we skip to verse 15, the king's search for a new queen continues. And as we said, Esther keeps her Jewish identity a secret. And, this is one of those parts of the story, again, where on the one hand, when I was a kid sort of growing up, I thought, what a strange thing, right? Why would anybody need to keep their Judaism a secret? What would the intention be here? Why was that necessary, right? As a kid, you don't really quite comprehend or understand it. And I remember, since October 7th, that was one of the first conversations that came up. I think Rabbi Buchdahl gave a very powerful sermon about, don't take your mezuzah off the door, as Rabbi Timoner, right? That a lot of people were, hiding their Magen David, taking down their mezuzah, afraid to have, public identification of. And I think rather than viewing Esther at this point as cowardly, right, or as what a shameful thing to hide your identity, I think we actually understand it much, much more deeply. That it's not such a simple calculation in this story, and it wasn't such a simple calculation for a lot of people, especially in the early days of last year. So, again, we find ourselves in this story the more we really dig into it and deeply think about it. But nonetheless, it's important to know that when she does this, it's really at Mordecai's suggestion. Right? Mordecai is a big factor in the way that Esther, plays this out. We don't know what she would have done otherwise. And I have a sneaking suspicion, as we know her by the end of the story, she may never have hidden it in the first place and then may never have survived long enough to do the things that she does. That's one of the things that makes this story so compelling. Yeah. So meanwhile, Mordecai happens to be walking by and overhears and ultimately foils a plot by 2 royal guards, Bigtan and Teresh, to assassinate the king. And while this event is recorded in the royal chronicles, right, the equivalent of the news of the day, it's not rewarded at that time. Right? The king doesn't really have an awareness of who Mordecai is or what really has taken place. Remember that. It will come back to us a little bit later. So Will's going to pick up for us now. We're reading in English, chapter 2, verses 15 to 23.
When the turn came for Esther, daughter of Avichail, the uncle of Mordecai, who had adopted her as his own daughter, to go to the king, she did not ask for anything but what Haggai, the king's eunuch, guardian of the women, advised. Yet Esther won the admiration of all who saw her. Esther was taken to King Achashverosh in his royal palace in the 10th month, which is the month of Tevet, in the 7th year of his reign. The king loved Esther more than all the other women, and she won his grace and favor more than all the virgins. So he set a royal diadem on her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. The king gave a great banquet for all his officials and courtiers, the banquet of Esther. He proclaimed a remission of taxes for the provinces and distributed gifts as befits a king. When the virgins were assembled a second time, Mordecai sat in the palace gate. But Esther still did not reveal her kindred or her people, as Mordecai had instructed her, for Esther obeyed Mordecai's bidding, as she had done when she was under his tutelage. At that time, when Mordecai was sitting in the palace gates, Bigtan and Teresh, two of the king's eunuchs who guarded the threshold, became angry and plotted to do away with King Ahasuerus. Mordecai learned of it and told it to Queen Esther, and Esther reported it to the king in Mordecai's name. The matter was investigated and found to be so, and the two were impaled on stakes. This was recorded in the book of Annals at the instance of the king.
Okay. Now, before we shift over to chapter 3, and we'll start chanting again for us in Hebrew, the story now shifts to our villain of the story, Haman. You can do it now, even if, good practice. Okay, and his rise to power. The king promotes him to a high-ranking position, and all royal officials are commanded to bow before him. Mordecai, however, refuses to do so. And as you can imagine, this does not make Haman happy. And Haman, there you go, very good. Thank you, Neil. But Haman learns, very good, that Mordecai is Jewish. He decides not just to punish him, but to destroy all Jews in the empire. And he's so offended by the idea that somebody would not bow down to him that he not only punishes one, but he punishes all. He ultimately casts lots. The lots, does anybody know the word for a lot in Hebrew? Purim, right? Our holiday of Purim, the holiday of lots. This, interesting again, right? The name of the holiday is drawn from this terrible thing that is taking place. Okay? A lot because, again, the whole concept is to turn everything on its head. Casts lots to determine the date for the annihilation and persuades the king to issue a decree ordering their destruction. And we'll pick up now with the beginning of chapter 3, verses 1 through 6.
Achar hadevarim ha'ele gidal hamelech Achashverosh et Haman ben Hamareta ha'agagi vayinasehu vayasem et kiso me'al kol sarim asher ito v'chol avdei hamelech Asher sha'ar hamelech korim umishtachavim lahaman ki chen tziva lo hamelech umordechai lo yikra velo yishtachave vayomheru avdei hamelech.
Nope, not Haman, Hamelech.
Love the enthusiasm, but not.
It's just a definite article. We can't do the definite article. That's
Asher b'sha'ar hamelech leMordechai madua ata over et mitzvat hamelech vayehi ka'amram elav yom ve'yom velo shama alehem vayagidu lehaman Lir'ot haya'amdu divrei Mordechai ki higid lahem asher hu Yehudi vayar Haman ki ein Mordechai korea umishtachave lo vayimale Haman Vayavez beinav lishloach yad leMordechai levado ki higidu lo et am Mordechai Vayivakesh Haman Lashmid et kol haYehudim asher bechol malchut Achashverosh am Mordechai.
Beautiful. You guys are doing great with your groggering, by the way. Excellent. It's a really actually complicated holiday. You know, if you
It
have
is
a
a very
Megillah and you
complicated
have a,
holiday.
you know,
There's
it's
a lot
like
of
you only
moving
have so
parts.
many hands,
There's
so
a
you can
lot
only
of
do so
moving
many
parts.
things. So, what did we'll just chant beautifully for us? Sometime afterwards, King Achashverosh promoted Haman. You can do the English too. We can boo him all we want. All right. Hamanatah the Agagite. He advanced him and seated him higher than any of his fellow officials. All the king's courtiers in the palace gate knelt and bowed low to Haman. Boo! For such was the king's order concerning him. But Mordechai would not kneel or bow low. And then the king's courtiers who were in the palace gate said to Mordechai, why do you disobey the king's order? And when they spoke to him day after day and he would not listen to them, they told Haman, boo, in order to see whether Mordechai's resolve would prevail. For he had explained to them that he was a Jew. When Haman saw that, good. I thought we were booing for the Jew thing at first, and then I got worried. Very good. When Haman saw that Mordechai would not kneel or bow low to him, Haman, boo, was filled with rage, but he disdained to lay hands on Mordechai alone. Having been told who Mordechai's people were, Haman plotted, boo, to do away with all the Jews, and Mordechai's people throughout the kingdom of Achashverosh. Now, we're going to cover a bit of ground here, because our next chanting is not all the way until chapter 7. So what's happening in the in-between? Mordechai and the Jewish people, upon hearing the decree, go into mourning. And our traditional practice of mourning, they put on sackcloth, they sit in ashes, right? They demonstrate in the very real sense that they are ready in anticipation of the things that are to come. And just to know that this practice of when you hear some terrible news of this sort, right, there are people still to this day, this is the sort of response to, right? When you know, in an ancient sense, it is the most outward way that you can possibly demonstrate a sense of either actual doom or impending doom. And so you really have to imagine an entire group, and this is not a small community, people, right? The Jewish community of Persia of this time is quite significant. So imagining, right, tens of thousands of Jewish people sitting on the floor, right, in this sense that things are really, they're over. But Mordechai, in this case, he urges Esther to intercede with the king. And what is he doing at this moment, right? What was his advice to Esther at the beginning?
Hide yourself.
Hide yourself, right? But he understands that the circumstances have changed, and now their only real hope is her. And so she goes to him and knows what he is asking of her, right? He knows the risk that is entailed, and so does she. But he understands that if she doesn't do this, if she doesn't intercede, most likely everyone in the community will be wiped out. Esther, therefore, risking her life, approaches the king unsummoned. And just to make sure that we understand what that means, in these types of situations, it's not just, in her case, there is nobody above the king. Nobody summons the king to anything. The king summons you. So when she offers this opportunity to get together, right, or in this case comes to see him unexpected, is a for lack of a word, it's a chutzpahdik move, right? It's taking everything into her own hands. But this is the brilliance again of Esther, is she understands pretty easily where she is disempowered, right? Where she doesn't have ability to make change, and she uses her intellect, she uses her brain, she uses her wits, she uses her cleverness to get around the natural circumstances of the time in order to set the pieces in place that she might actually have a chance to overturn and to ultimately to stop this terrible thing from taking place. So she invites the king and Haman to a banquet. At the first banquet, she invites them to another one the next night. And that same night, it happens that the king suffers from sleeplessness and has the royal records read to him. So, anytime that you're struggling to fall asleep and you put on NPR, this is exactly what he's doing. He said, read me the royal stuff. And he didn't know about what it is that Mordechai had done in saving his life earlier from the assassination plot. And it reminds him again that Mordechai once saved his life. And wanting to reward Mordechai, he ironically orders Haman, who had planned to have Mordechai executed, to lead him through the streets in honor. And this is that brilliant moment in the story in which Haman thinks that she's talking, boo, right? That the idea is that he's the one that should be paraded around on the horse, and needless to say, it's like every opportunity to make him angrier. This is getting him angrier and angrier and angrier. So we're going to turn now to chapter 7, and if you're in our sheets, we're on page 4, and Will will read for us the first 10 verses of chapter 7. And we'll find our way across here.
Vayavo hamelech vehaman
Boo!
lishtot im Esther hamalka. Vayomer hamelech leEsther gam bayom hasheni b'mishtei hayayin ma she'altech Esther hamalka vatiten lach Uma bakashatech im chatzi hamalchut vateas vataan Esther hamalka vatomer im matzati chen beinecha hamelech ve'im al hamelech tov Tinaten li nafshi bishe'alti ve'ami bevakashti ki nimkarnu ani ve'ami le'ashmid le'harogu le'abed ve'ilu la'avadim velishpachot nimkarnu hecherashti kim ein hatzar shove benezek hamelech vayomer hamelech achashverosh vayomer lester hamalka mi hu ze ve'ezehu Asher mal'o lib'o lasot ken vatomer Esther ish tsar ve'oyev Haman hara hazeh ve'Haman niv'at milifnei hamelech ve'amalka ve'amelech Kam bechamato mimishte hayayin el ginat habitan vehaman amad levakesh al nafsho me'ester hamalka ki ra'a ki chalta elav hara me'et hamelech Ve'hamelech shav miginat habitan el beit mishte hayayin Haman nofel al hamita asher Esther aleha vayomer hamelech Hagam lichbosh et hamalka imi babayit hadavar yatzar mipi hamelech ufnei Haman chafu vayomer harvona echad min hasarisim lifnei hamelech gam hinei haetz asher asa Haman ve'Mordechai asher diber tov al hamelech omed beveit Haman gavoa chamishim ama Vayomer hamelech tiluhu alav, vayitlu et Haman al ha'etz asher heichin leMordechai, vachamat hamelech shechacha.
That one is always, I think, every year is a trick, because
every
it sounds just like it. So, the king and Haman came to feast with Queen Esther. On the second day, the king again asked Esther at the wine feast, "What is your wish, Queen Esther? It shall be granted you, and what is your request? Even to half the kingdom it shall be fulfilled." Queen Esther replied, "If your majesty will do me the favor, and if it pleases your majesty, let my life be granted me as my wish, and my people as my request. For we have been sold, my people and I, to be destroyed, massacred, exterminated. Had we only been sold as bondsmen and bondwomen, I would have kept silent, for the adversary is not worthy of the king's trouble." Thereupon King Ahasuerus demanded of Queen Esther, "Who is he, and where is he who dared to do this?" "The adversary and enemy," replied Esther, "is the evil Haman." Boo! And Haman cringed in terror before the king and the queen. The king in his fury left the wine feast for the palace garden, while Haman remained to plead with Queen Esther for his life, for he saw that the king had resolved to destroy him. And when the king returned from the palace garden to the banquet room, Haman was lying prostrate on the couch on which Esther reclined. "Does he mean," cried the king, "to ravish the queen in my own palace?" No sooner had these words left the king's lips that Haman's face was covered. And then Charvona, one of the eunuchs in attendance on the king, said, "What is more, a stake is standing at Haman's house, 50 cubits high, which Haman made for Mordecai, the man whose words saved the king. Impale him on it." The king ordered. And so they impaled Haman on the stake which he had put up for Mordecai, and the king's fury abated. Okay. It's not a PG story, by the way. There is a certain element of this. The kids are a big part of Purim. When I grew up at B'nai Jeshurun in the city. Hundreds of kids, all in costumes. They have absolutely no idea about what is going on. And not just in this chapter, but in particular what happens in the next few chapters. So much so that it is very uncommon in Reform congregations, I'm not sure any, that actually will chant chapter 9, where it's not just Haman, but Haman's entire family that gets wiped out, and in which there is actually the fighting that takes place. It's important to understand kind of what takes place between here and there. So what happens is, there is a decree that's already been made, and the king can't exactly roll back the decree. So instead, another decree is made in which the Jews are empowered to defend themselves. Now remember, again, as subjects of the Persian king, prior to that, that was not a power that they were allowed to have. And so in essence, the day that was chosen for the Jewish annihilation becomes now a day of fighting. And in that fighting, the Jews are able not only to survive, but in the end, are able to fight back and to kill off all of their oppressors, to the number of really tens of thousands across the entire empire of Persia. And included in that are Haman's sons. And so there was a tradition actually of when the person who's reading the Megillah gets to that section is to try to chant all the names in one single breath.
Yeah.
And it's not something we're going to make Will do this
We're not
year.
doing
That's
that
a
this
year 5 thing at AGC, not a year 2 thing, for sure. But to understand that there is always a certain element of this story that even when we succeed, even when we didn't pick the fight in the first place, even when we fight back simply to save our lives, that there is a constant sort of reticence on our parts to feel jubilant about it, right? On the one hand, it's a jubilant holiday, but there is a part of this story that there still is this feeling like, even in the text itself, there is an opportunity, for example, to loot, to take the possessions of the people they've killed. And the Jews of the community make a very significant point to say that is not going to happen. We're not going to take 1 peso, as it were, right? Not a cent. And the main reason why is to demonstrate that there was never a desire to fight. There was never a desire to kill. There was never a desire for anybody, and it was certainly not to take anybody's place. But when we are threatened, when our lives are threatened, when our homes are threatened, when our community is threatened, we, like any other people, unfortunately, will oftentimes have to pick up the sword to defend ourselves. And again, if you can't see the immediate connections between our sad current reality, as it were, and the stories of all these generations ago, this same tension still exists. Right? The same tension exists in the heart of every soldier that fights in Israel. Right? This is always the challenge. It's not a fight that any of us want, but in the end, right, our existence matters to us, right? And we need to, in some cases, do what we need to do to defend ourselves and to continue to be the people that we are. But nonetheless, these chapters, these intervening chapters, are challenging ones. And while we're not going to read them exactly tonight, I don't want to skip over them as if they don't exist. But we will find ourselves at the more joyful end of the story, in which things start to come together, and in which we understand where this holiday of Purim ultimately comes from. So we will turn to chapter 10, verses 1 through 3, to carry us through the end. Vayasem hamelech Achashverosh mas al haaretz ve'yehi hayam bechol maaseh tafchu uvrato ufarshat gedulat Mordechai asher gilu hamelech Halohem ketuvim al sefer divrei hayamim lemalechei madai ufaras ki Mordechai hayehudi mishne lamelech Achashverosh vegadol layehudim ratzui lerhov echav Doresh tov le'amo udover shalom lechol zarom. And King Achashverosh imposed a tribute on the mainland and the islands, all his mighty and powerful acts, and a full account of the greatness to which the king advanced to Mordechai are recorded in the annals of the king of Media and Persia. For Mordechai the Jew ranked next to King Achashverosh, and was highly regarded by the Jews and popular with the multitude of his brethren. He sought the good of his people and interceded for the welfare of all of his kindred. And as we end the story, we know that we turn again, the day in which things could have been the end for our people, we turn into a holiday, right? We turn it hahefech, we turn it upside down. And we make sure, as we talked about, that on this holiday we do 4 things. Okay, 4 things. 1, which some of you have already done, I hope all of you have done, mishloach manot, right? We send gifts to each other, to our friends, we build community. Okay, matanot le'evyonim, we make sure to take from the bounty of our own lives and we share with those who do not have it, specifically because our tradition says, especially around holidays, everyone should be able to celebrate the holiday joyfully and with everything that they need. So we make sure that there's nobody left in the community who can't do this with fullness of heart. We hear the Megillah, right, as Will very importantly pointed out, right? It's the commandment, the mitzvah around it is not about reading it, it's about hearing it. So luckily we have wonderful people like Will who help us to do that, right? But a lot of our tradition tells us that the listening to it is the most important. And while listening can sometimes be a passive act, in this holiday it's an active thing. You have to really be there and you have to really pay attention to it. And I think this year, especially, right, pay really close attention to the story and to draw wisdom from it, to draw inspiration from it, and to realize that these stories are certainly interesting and there's a reason to tell them, but they're not just interesting, right? They are instructive lessons. They are Torah in the deepest sense. And of course, and not at all insignificant, is our 4th mitzvah, which we are going to celebrate together next door in just a moment. Thanks very much to, and I don't know how it got arranged other than to thank Shelley, but I'm sure that someone other than Shelley also may have made it financially possible for us to have a delicious meal, which we will, one day we'll actually find a Persian restaurant. Rona. Thank you, Rona.
Thank you,
Rona. Big hugs
Thank
to
you,
Rona. All right, thank you, Rona. Truly, very, very wonderful to do that. It's what it's all about here. And so in a moment, when we finish our service, we'll all go next door, have a little chance of a bite to eat. And I will just say at the outset, unfortunately, I am going to have to run to get back to the hospital, but I will be back tomorrow night for sure. But I'll certainly not run out without saying goodbye to everybody. But I hope that you will hang out with Will and make sure that he eats, because students, they need to keep their energy up and all of that good stuff.
They do.
But there is a very famous line from the Megillah, which was turned into a very wonderful, upbeat piece of music.
Mm-hmm.
Well, why don't you maybe tell us what page we're on and how we can end this together?
Can I also just say one thing?
Yes, of course.
So we're going to move to page 640 and sing this verse from chapter 8 of the Megillah, La Yehudim Haita Ora V'Simcha V'Sason V'Ikar, which our Siddur translates as the Jews had light, joy, gladness, and honor. And it's in this story of the upside down in which Esther, whose name means I will hide.
Right.
You know, coming from the verb lehastir.
Right.
To hide, as we read in our Psalms, al tastir panecha, do not hide mimeni.
Yes.
Do not hide your face from me.
Very nice.
And it's the name that's given to her by her uncle Mordechai, right? Which then, oh jeez, sorry, in chapter 4.
Wow. Right.
In chapter 4.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, it's all right. It's all right. Take your time. You got something to say.
I do have something to say.
Yeah.
Mordechai says to Esther, Umi Yodea. Who knows? Oh, I have it. Im le'et kazot, higata la malchut.
Yeah.
Perhaps it was for a time such as this
Yeah.
that you've ascended to your position. I'm so sorry, I don't know why this got me.
You're apologizing to me of all people?
Sorry, that's so true. That's so true. That's so true. But all I was going to say about this was we never know where in our lives there are these moments where you can stand up and say something, and it doesn't have to be huge.
Right.
It just has to be something.
Right.
That there are these moments when you could be the only person that says what you know in your heart is right. And to just remember that, that's the core of this holiday
Beautiful.
to me.
Beautiful.
So let's sing. Page 640.
Yeah.
La Yehudim Haitaora Vesimcha Vesason Yikar. La Yehudim Haitaora Vesimcha Vesason Vikar. Ken Tielanu. Ken Tielanu. 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 Ken Tielanu. Tielanu, Tielanu, La Yehudim, La Yehudim, Aitaora, Vesimcha, Vesason, Vikar. Purim Sameach.
Purim Sameach, everybody. Please come next door. Let's eat together. Thank you again, Rona, for making this all happen. Thank you, Shelley, for making all the arrangements. Thank you, Will, for that beautiful Torah at the end. You know what? Happiness also results in tears sometimes, you know? Thank you, everybody. And if you can, just bring your groggers back, unless you want a Haman. No, you can take them home. Oh, there is. I think that would be very appropriate personally, but I'll leave that to. I thought you were going to use it on Neil, though. I thought that was where you were going with that. Yeah. So someday, hey, were you here when my dad was here? Did you get a chance to meet him? I don't know. Was that a couple weeks? Oh, like a while back. Oh, I wasn't sure if you got like he covered for me. You sat with him, right? Oh, that's right. Oh. Yeah. Right. You're not. No, look. No, you missed it. I think that actually is nice. That's actually really nice. If you put a bandana on, you could also be like mid-90s hip-hop, West Coast hip-hop. Oh, no, I was just telling you. I'll try to dig up a picture of Howard from years past so you can see his usual costume. I know,